The expression on the Brigadier's face is anything but warm, and Dobbs can see he's fast approaching his flip side. "I don't want any more. Enough now. Had a good blast though," Dobbs says, trying to make light of the Brigadier's withdrawal rattling and blatant demand. "We treated you to a good night out, had some fun, so don't give us all that," he fires back. Dobbs shakes his head woefully, turning to Agent 6 to see where he's at with the whole thing. "Don't look at me. I'm having a break," he says, deflecting the situation. Dobbs reluctantly reaches into his pocket and hands over the 50 solis, and like that, the Brigadier's gone. "Things are going to get a little bit mad," Dobbs whispers, glancing over at Agent 6. "I really want Bolivar to get here so we can just take off. I don't know how long I can hang out with him like this, you know? I've had my blowout with him. What good it might have done, I can't say. You know, when we went back out last night, he blew all his money in that casino. Everything." There's a tone of total disdain in Agent 6's voice. "Everything? You gotta be joking. What's he gonna do?" "He's going from the hungry ghost realm straight into the hell realm," Dobbs says, throwing a bit of Tibetan Buddhist philosophy into the equation, for good measure. He takes off his hat and throws it on the bed, running his hands through his sweaty hair. "I mean, I suppose it might do him some good, but he's a serious liability now," he says, and then sighing adds, "But stuck in Lima broke. In that state. Shit." Agent 6 sits on the bed and pulls his legs up in a very relaxed manner. "You wanted a story, didn't you?" "But yeah, I didn't want this, a fucking pestilence frenzy." "Bullshit. I want a mission to write a book, not chronicle his bloody demise. Same thing, isn't it?" "Shit. What to do? He's like some crazy Christian that's locked his sights on an all-out apocalyptic showdown. I can't help but think sticking out with him is synonymous with going down with him. On his current course, he's chartering a passage far away from decency to feed that thing. Shit, man. He's going to sail clean off the edge of the world. You wanted a story about why the banks are about to go down? If you're so sure they are, then what better than entering the head of a banker?" Agent 6 says, glances at Dobbs, then retrieves what looks like a lump of fine Manali cream from his pocket. "Time to get off this crazy locomotive," he grins. "Good call." In no time at all, an aromatic smoke is scenting the air, and they're both sitting on their beds, comfortably stoned, and wondering what they're doing with their lives in the shadow of the come-down. "I mean, that was supposed to be a great night out, and I didn't even talk to a single girl," Dobbs says. "Not that I was looking for anything, but bloody hell, a bit of refined pestilence and all that, but let's face it, a girlless bar, a barren casino, and not much else. It all just feels like a total downer." Agent 6 is silent and contemplative. After some time, he says, "Good to have a blowout with him, though. I knew I was going to have a blowout with the old Brigadier. And then maybe we could say, yeah, we've done that. Now let's move on, you know? But he's not ready to leave it. Not yet, at any rate." He passes the spliff to Dobbs. "Yeah, whatever. Call me old-fashioned, but pestilence aside, where's the chicas from Chile, man? I thought having some fun might actually include a bit of getting blown away by the opposite sex, rather than just sitting blowing cash in a joint like that," Dobbs conveys with a look of disappointment. "I wasn't blowing no money in that joint. The pestilence is £3 a gram, and drinks were on the house. I gambled about a tenner the whole night. How much did you blow?" "Well, yeah," Dobbs chuckles. "I don't think the word blow quite captures my expenditure last night." "Exactly. We're all just feeling the come down now and nothing more. And well, you're just waking up to the fact he's losing it." Shit. After not much more than an hour of lulling about, the door bursts open. Dobbs is reading, and Agent 6 has sunk into a tired sort of lull, but the Brigadier is back, completely reinflated, and everything is running at about 300 miles per hour again. To Dobbs, it's getting boring, and this is only the second day. The Brigadier begins racking up some lines on the TV, but neither Dobbs nor Agent 6 are interested. "Maybe later," Dobbs says, a hint of reservation in his voice. The Brigadier, obviously offended at this refusal of his hospitality, marches back over to the TV, and dispensing with the etiquette of a note, recklessly vacuums the lot up his nose by dragging his whole face across the top of the TV set. Then he turns around, coldly staring at Dobbs, as he carelessly wipes off the vast residue of powder smudged around his face with the back of his hand. Agent 6 is totally unimpressed. He jumps off the bed, grabs his sound system and, without showing any fear of the Brigadier whatsoever, stalks out of the room, almost barging into the other man as he goes and forcing him to jump out the way. Dobbs, who is clearly nervous, can see that the Brigadier is absolutely seething with barely controlled anger, but he just sits there, attempting to disengage from his stroppy mood. He feels distinctly uncomfortable though, and the Brigadier knows it. His ego is inflating out of control, feeding off Dobbs's fear. "Man, you're freaking me out," he finally manages to shout, then buries his head into his book and attempts to shut out the world beyond the edges of its pages. The room is split into two sections and has a separate bedroom at the rear, which the Brigadier has taken for himself, leaving 3 beds in the main section for Dobbs, Agent 6 and Bolivar when he turns up. For a moment, the Brigadier stares at Dobbs with eyes of fury, but then, to Dobbs' profound relief, he silently stalks back to his room. Dobbs grabs his book again. It's called The Party's Over by Richard Heinberg, and charts in a fashion America's third run of entering a peak oil scenario, and the scary similarities between now and the previous 2 times, which led to the First and the Second World Wars, respectively. He's still pretty freaked out, and the irony of the book's title is by no means lost on him, but he's tried to lose himself in its pages, nonetheless. It seems to suggest that what is economically unfolding now is nothing more than a currency crisis, propagated by war, disease, famine, terror, and all funded by a credit machine out of control. There's nothing new in there for Dobbs really, but the research is thorough. It's a statistician's funfair. It perplexes him to consider war as a viable business with today's military technology, however. The First World War started with cavalry and ended with tanks and bombers. The Second World War started with tanks and bombers and ended with a nuclear bomb. It's not exactly hard to see where a Third World War would start, though God knows where it would end. In today's world, a so-called mini-nuke has the explosive force 10 times greater than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, and they are listed by the Pentagon as safe for civilian use. The present-day equivalent of a Hiroshima-sized bomb is called a daisy cutter. Nobody really survives in the vicinity of one of those when they go off, as it's full of sharp shards of metal, but it's not nuclear, so it's considered a clean bomb. It is the most awesome nail bomb ever invented. In their blast radius, they cut everything to shreds. Everything. Thus explaining the cute little name that always makes Dobbs think of kids making daisy chains. How many daisy cutters have been dropped on Afghanistan and Iraq, along with all the depleted uranium bombshells? It's difficult to know. The first Iraq invasion was only supposed to last a year, but the bombing went on for over a decade before the next Iraq war officially started, where in 2003 alone, 240,000 tons of depleted uranium were deployed. The true figures have been heavily suppressed, but Dobbs had read in one block they could be as high as 40,000 times as much radioactive waste as was generated by the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, an estimate based on the unprecedented volume of birth defects and cancers and other diseases associated with the radiation exposure reported since the invasion. It's obvious to him now, the only way to stop a Third World War is simply not to start one. But how do you do that when it's never you or anyone you ever seem to know who beats the war drum? Who makes these choices, he thinks to himself. Is it really the voters? Are there normal people out there that don't directly profit from war actually voting for it? He's never met any himself. It torments him. His partner can't stand him talking about it. "You're not a fucking economist," she'd scream every time he raised the subject. For her it was all doom and gloom. Oh, and that other terrible word she hated hearing. Conspiracy. Anyone who looks for an answer to these questions encounters conspiracy theories within the first click of their web search. She hated them. Or maybe she just hated what they did to his head. He couldn't decide. It was as though she was policing his thoughts sometimes. But then, it was becoming an obsession. He'd accepted that. Coming back to the present, Dobbs realizes his mind is just awash with noisy interference. He feels hostility towards the Brigadier as though he's entangled in his anger. He drops his book down on his lap for a moment and tries to feel for the space beyond the anger, then hold himself there. Suddenly out of nowhere he remembers that Brigadier is a full-blown junkie at the moment. Had he somehow managed to forget that little nugget? That's the long and the short of it, and it has to be taken into account. He'd fully engaged with the antics of the previous night, and it's affected his judgment, he realizes. He takes a breath, moving away from the bitterness, then gets up and walks over to the Brigadier's room. "I think I'm going to get some fresh air," he says calmly. The Brigadier is sat on the bed, just staring emotionless at the ceiling. Dobbs doesn't linger, but instead wanders out the room, and up the iron spiral staircase leading to the roof, where Agent 6 is just standing, looking out over the city. He seems a little lost, and Dobbs guesses he's contemplating his problematic relationship with his girlfriend, which, despite the fact it is full of confrontation, still seems to persist in their absence from each other, in the form of endless text messages. It's consuming so much of his time, but yet he's showing no sign of moving through the mess it's made of his head. He's clearly weighed down by it all. They spend an hour or so just listening to music through Agent 6's iPod and speaker system. Dobbs tries to make light conversation, but his heart's not in the best state either. His own relationship back home is on the rocks as well, but right now he's just feeling total relief to have a break from it all. It's probably the pestilence come down that's battering Agent 6 more than anything else. Dobbs knows that will pass, and soon, with the hot afternoon sun on their faces, the fresh air blowing in from the sea, it all starts to feel exciting again. After about an hour or so of this sunny vagueness, the sound of the Brigadier's saxophone can be heard floating up the spiral staircase. Whatever torture space he's been in has evidently lifted a little, even though his presence still feels pretty wired. But as he sways and moves with the music, as though manufacturing the tones in his very core, Dobbs can sense he's making a massive effort. And the old Brigadier is clearly coming through. Dobbs knows he's not a bad man. If anything, he's normally pretty caring. He remembered a time not so many years before when they'd all been working at V Festival, and Dobbs had been dozing off under the sun in the early morning, recovering from the previous night's antics, neither really asleep nor awake. He'd been aware of the stragglers making their way back to their tents through his sleepy haze, and just then along came a big bloke who'd peered down the gap between the trucks where they were all asleep. For some reason Dobbs had never found out, the man just turned and with an expression like he'd suddenly become an axe murderer, paced with thundering steps towards him. The guy was so focused on Dobbs, however, that he failed to see the Brigadier asleep between them and stepped clean on his head. The Brigadier had shot up and standing directly in front of the stranger, giving him a dose of his own scary medicine. Then toe-to-toe with this guy promising to perform extreme bodily harm on him, the Brigadier had stated, "Yeah, but you ain't got what it takes to have a fight with a bloke that's right up for it, have you? You're just a yellow pussy. You've been searching for someone to fight who you know won't fight back, because you can't fight a real fight." The man had shaken with rage, and the Brigadier had laughed in his face. "When you're ready to fight like a man, take your first punch." But with every step the Brigadier took forward, the man had taken a step back, until eventually, and still spitting venom all the way, had been walked clean off the site, backwards. The Brigadier was like a bulldog, whose nature was to protect his friends and ward off danger, normally. Nonetheless, Agent 6's face drops at the sight of him now, as he obviously figures the Brigadier is going to try to dominate the airwaves and drown out the sounds from his stereo again. At first it seems he may be right, as the melody seems to have been lost in an eclectic selection of random notes. It's not bad, but his obnoxiousness is still overshadowing the music a little. But as he strides around the roof blowing his sax, his mood mellows and the vibe slowly becomes more noticeably lighter. Agent 6 looks over to Dobbs. "Snake Charmer himself," he says, just loud enough so the Brigadier can hear. Then, as if by magic, the one thing Dobbs would most like, but is least expecting to happen, a beautiful woman, her blonde hair cut in a cute bob, emerges from the spiral staircase on the rooftop. Obviously drawn by the sound of the Brigadier's melodic talents, both Agent 6 and Dobbs are momentarily transfixed. "I'll fight you for her," Dobbs whispers to Agent 6. "Not a hope in hell. She's mine." But just then, just as he's about to add something more, another girl with short dark hair, equally gorgeous, follows close behind. Agent 6's jaw drops another 3 inches. "Actually, you like your dirty blondes. I think I'm down with a brunette," he says. Meanwhile, the Brigadier is walking over to the girls, taking long, slow steps as he plays. He circles them, as though magically drawing them up. Dobbs doesn't take his eyes off the ladies. "I wonder if they're from Chile," he says almost under his breath. "I'm more worried about the numbers. We're kind of one short." Agent 6 says, his tongue nearly touching the ground, and then nodding to the Brigadier. "Hey, we're one short. Keep blowing, cowboy." The Brigadier directs his sax to the stairs, gives a little toot, and to Dobbs' genuine amazement, a third girl, equally attractive, rises like a genie from the stairwell. The Brigadier's eyes meet the girl's, and he gives her a cheeky grin. Then looking over to the others, and nodding with an animated glee, he circles round her, as if manifesting this vision of loveliness with the melody of his sax alone. The girl doesn't seem as flirtatious as the first two. It's not that she's not sexy, but her face has more of an expression of friendly curiosity, perhaps. Her short, mousy hair is styled in a way that suggests a youthful innocence, Yet at the same time, there's something calmer and more mature about her. In contrast, the blonde who was first to ascend the steps clearly knows she's fresh, and Dobbs grins at her unashamedly. She's got it all going on, he muses. As has the brunette, who's got to be Chilean. She's a skinny, super hot Latino babe wearing tight jeans, which accentuate her sexy slow stride and curvaceous hips, and Agent 6 fairly laps up her moves as she wanders closer. It's fair to say that none of these boys are shy, and if the girls want their jaws to drop, then jaws are going to drop. They both look at the girls and then back at each other, openly exchanging nods of approval while sending clear messages to the ladies, who put on a bit of a blush. Dobbs glances back at Agent 6 and sees the sparkle in his eyes. I ain't seen one line of pestilence do what that cheeky little brunette's doing for you right now. 1 minute you're in hell, but the girls are standing right in front of them now, just staring and saying nothing. Agent 6 returns the stare unashamedly, looking deep into the brunette's nut-brown eyes as though hypnotized. Nikki, she offers, almost like this is all just a magic trick. Wow, he blatantly states. Agent 6, and then goes to shake her hand whilst looking her up and down outrageously, almost undressing her as he does so and not hiding one tiny piece of his obvious lust to lose his hands up her tight t-shirt. The brigadier stops playing his sax and begins speaking so fast that even Agent 6, whose Spanish is very good, is struggling to understand what he's saying, as it seems a long convoluted sentence. The girl with the mousy hair turns to him and with a smile says the word which even Dobbs can understand, Chile, and then like Nikki offers her hand, Perlita. He and Agent 6 glance at each other and can barely contain themselves. The girls look at each other with half-curious expressions, smirking. Dobbs returns the blonde bombshell's friendly gaze with a look of total disbelief. Fantastic, he breathes. She brushes her hair back, pouting her gorgeous full lips at the brigadier, then glancing over at Agent 6, almost as if to see if he's checking her out. Of course he's checking her out. He's like a dog with two dicks and can barely contain himself. But Dobbs is clearly getting older, he thinks to himself, because whatever hold he once had over gorgeous young things like this is waning faster than he can actually believe, and all attention seems to be on his compadres. 10 minutes pass and Dobbs is struggling to talk with Esmeralda, the young woman with blonde hair. The brigadier is making manoeuvres on Perlita whilst Agent 6 is engaged in a gazing competition with Nikki, the Latino bombshell. It's quite a spectacle. She seems to draw her lips apart with a lusting, almost uncontrollable twitch that diverts back into a periodical pout. Her lower teeth are somehow revealed slightly more than her upper teeth, with her jaw slightly extended. The overall effect is that she appears to be perpetually 3 seconds away from an orgasm. It's all very visual, and Dobbs has to fight back a chuckle. He watches her hold her breasts up high, with her chest out and her arms just hanging loose by her side. She seems to drop her field of vision downwards periodically, as if she's trying to work out what Agent 6 is hiding in his pocket. Then again, perhaps he's just trying to translate the words on his t-shirt he'd picked up on the way to the Burning Man festival in America the previous year. Las Vegas, liquor in the front, poker in the rear, reads the legend, all blinged out in gold, printed above a picture of a raunchy cowgirl spinning a lasso over her head. Minutes later, the whole troop are very relaxed, all apart from the brigadier, that is, who's still looking pretty twitchy. The hotel management is one step ahead of the game, however, and noticing the potential for business is having drinks ferried up to the roof. The Pisco Sour is one of Lima's most favoured cocktails, legendary for its citric bitterness. Dobbs, who's just taken the first sip, is experiencing a total shock and awe wake-up hit, followed by an immediate sweet aftermath, and something else, far stronger, that flushes through him in a delirious wave of giddiness. It somehow seems to capture the taste of the unfolding adventure, like Lima in a glass, glimmering in the golden sun. In one moment he feels himself ascending out of the horrible headfuck of the pestilence come down, and yet, as he casts his vision out over the city and the adventure that awaits beyond, he has an uncomfortable nagging thought. How can I ever capture that view alone? How do I even begin to write that? He shudders at the thought of the linguistic restrictions of his crap English. Never mind his crap Spanglish. In fact, his whole enthusiasm for writing a book seems battered by the previous night's exploits. Cheers, he says, proffering his glass up to Esmeralda. La bar is muy poquito, pero la liquor es muy fuerte, muy peligroso. Mucho gusto. Then he shrugs his shoulders. He's almost exhausted his meagre storehouse of Spanglish, and is now just about dead in the water. See, she says, and then rattles off another sentence he kind of understands a little, but not really. Entiendo, poquito, pero despacio, por favor. Esmeralda giggles. Learning Spanish, huh? Sí, claro. Oh, you speak English. I used to live in America, she says, keeping her energy directed more at the whole group. Thank God for that. I'll make an effort here and there, but it's early days, he says, holding his glass up to the gods before taking a huge celebratory gulp of his pisco sour. It's okay, I love the opportunity to speak English again, and remind myself I can still do it. Dobbs is still rushing from the shock of the cocktail, just nods and smiles. Cool. Everything is very fluid, just like the endless flow of cocktails and the plentiful reefers that keep doing the rounds. They run through all the normal formalities, and it turns out she's a photographer. She goes into a little detail about her work. It all sounds a bit corporate, and it's clear she's looking for a springboard into something more creative. The conversation quickly turns to art. Dobbs is no connoisseur on the subject, but the pisco sour is kicking in and he's ready to have a go. Can you imagine? There we were, off our tits, looking at the self-portrait of Van Gogh, but actually what we were seeing was Van Gogh, but in the flesh, just staring back at us, like he'd somehow painted his own energetic body that projected Van Gogh in the flesh. We both saw the same thing. Esmeralda looked surprised by the story, but also quite unimpressed. Oh yeah, I love art, Dobbs adds, blundering on with his silly tale of the time he'd visited the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam after eating a whole box of Mexican mushrooms with his ex. Vaguely, he realizes something's wrong. Esmeralda has stopped nodding politely and is now staring at him with an expression of what he can only describe as utter distaste. You take drugs? Dobbs coughs, clearing his throat, not quite expecting that. There's an uncomfortable moment of silence as Agent 6 and the Brigadier both overhear and glance over at her, but Dobbs tries to sidestep the comment and not show any surprise. Well, I've dabbled, I suppose. You? No? I'm Catholic, she declares. This time everyone turns and stares at her, shocked by the genuine sincerity of the announcement. She just didn't look the type. Oh, really? Dobbs finally says, and then looks up and toasts the heavens with his glass again. Fan-fucking-tastic, he says, feeling like a stand-up comedian who's just discovered he's got an American sitting in the front row. Oh, Dobbs says. Not that I was looking for anything, but bloody hell, a bit of refined pestilence and all that, but let's face it, a girlless bar, a barren casino and not much else. It all just feels like a total downer. Agent 6 is silent and contemplative. After some time, he says, Good to have a blowout with him, though. I knew I was going to have a blowout with the old Brigadier. And then maybe we could say, yeah, we've done that. Now let's move on, you know? But he's not ready to leave it. Not yet, at any rate. He passes the spliff to Dobbs. Yeah, whatever. Call me old-fashioned, but pestilence aside. Where's the chicas from Chile, man? I thought having some fun might actually include a bit of getting blown away by the opposite sex, rather than just sitting below chartering a passage far away from decency to feed that thing. Shit, man. He's going to sail clean off the edge of the world. You wanted a story about why the banks are about to go down? If you're so sure they are. Then what better than entering the head of a banker? Agent 6 says, glances at Dobbs, then retrieves what looks like a lump of fine Manali cream from his pocket. Time to get off this crazy locomotive, he grins. Good call. In no time at all, an aromatic smoke is scenting the air and they're both sitting on their beds, comfortably stoned, and wondering what they're doing with their lives in the shadow of the come-down. I mean, that was supposed to be a great night out, and I didn't even talk to a single girl over the 50 solis, and like that, the Brigadier's gone. Things are going to get a little bit mad, Dobbs whispers, glancing over at Agent 6. I really want Bolivar to get here so we can just take off. I don't know how long I can hang out with him like this, you know? I've had my blowout with him. What good it might have done, I can't say. You know, when we went back out last night, he blew all his money in that casino. Everything. There's a tone of total disdain in Agent 6's voice. Everything? You gotta be joking. What's he gonna do? He's going from the hungry ghost realm straight into the hell realm, Dobbs says, throwing a bit of Tibetan Buddhist philosophy into the equation, for good measure. He takes off his hat and throws it on the bed, running his hands through his sweaty hair. I mean, I suppose it might do him some good, but he's a serious liability now, he says, and then sighing adds, but stuck in Lima broke, in that state. Shit. Agent 6 sits on the bed and pulls his legs up in a very relaxed manner. You wanted a story, didn't you? But yeah, I didn't want this, a fucking pestilence frenzy. Bullshit. I'm on a mission to write a book, not chronicle his bloody demise. Same thing, isn't it? Shit. What to do? He's like some crazy Christian that's locked his sights on an all-out apocalyptic showdown. I can't help but think sticking out with him is synonymous with going down with him. On his current course, he's The expression on the Brigadier's face is anything but warm, and Dobbs can see he's fast approaching his flip side. I don't want any more. Enough now. Had a good blast though, Dobbs says, trying to make light of the Brigadier's withdrawal rattling and blatant demand. We treated you to a good night out, had some fun, so don't give us all that, he fires back. Dobbs shakes his head woefully, turning to Agent 6 to see where he's at with the whole thing. Don't look at me. I'm having a break, he says, deflecting the situation. Dobbs reluctantly reaches into his pocket and hands over